Is anything really changing in HR, or do we just rebrand the way that we talk about things? And I wondered if you could explain what you meant by that.
Yeah, this is triggered by a conversation I had with somebody about a fractured role, and I hadn't heard that term before. What do you mean by a fractured career, a fractured role? And they said, oh, that person goes into that organisation for a couple of days a week and does that role, and then they go and work somewhere else and do the same role but somewhere else for a couple of days a week. I do wonder and question, as a function, whether we don't make it easy for people, colleagues, management to access what we do and how we do it. Because we like to reinvent some of the terminology and the jargon that we put around kind of what we do and how we do it.
This episode is brought to you by Instant Impact. Instant Impact provides transformative talent solutions to small and mid-sized companies that are making between 30 and 500 hires each year. If your recruitment's giving you a headache and you don't know where to start, then give the team at Instant Impact a call or visit www.instant-impact.com for more information.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About HR. I'm your host, Louise Fraser, and today I am delighted to share the podcast studio with Ellie Evans. Ellie Evans is CPO at Just Group, and she has a wealth of experience in HR leadership roles, from everything from organizational design to cultural change programs across many industries and continents too. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you for having me on the show.
No problem. Let's first start by asking a question around you and your career. So tell us, how did you get into HR in the first place?
I kind of fell into HR, actually. I wasn't planning to go for a career in HR. I did a degree in medical microbiology and then a master's in human rights law, and then thought that I needed to get a proper job. And so I went for a graduate scheme at BAA down at Gatwick Airport. And I joined BAA at a time that it had some amazing HR professionals kind of leading the function. And it was a brilliant place to learn how to do HR properly. So I did my CIPD while I was there and kind of built my career up through the HR business partnering route. And I loved it. And I still love HR. It's the thing that kind of gets me out of bed in the morning. No 2 days are the same. And I've had some brilliant experiences working with some fantastic colleagues all over the place, really. So in Azerbaijan, in London, in Budapest, it's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed all of the experiences I've had.
I think that's really interesting. And there are two pieces I'd love to come back to during the podcast around working across borders globally. I think that's really interesting. And the future of graduate programs, because we are seeing those reductions across lots of large organizations. But first, I wanted to touch on a topic that has stuck out with me since we first met. We had a conversation about HR. We were talking about various topics such as cultural change. We talked about meta skills such as, curiosity and growth mindset. And you said to me something along the lines of, is anything really changing in HR, or do we just rebrand the way that we talk about things? And I wondered if you could explain to our podcast audience what you meant by that.
Yeah, this is triggered by a conversation I had with somebody about a fractured role, and I hadn't heard that term before. And I was like, what do you mean by a fractured career, a fractured role? And they said, oh, that person goes into that organisation for a couple of days a week and does that role, and then they go and work somewhere else and do the same role but somewhere else for a couple of days a week. I was like, oh, you mean like part-time working or advisory or consultancy? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, why are we calling it something new and something different when it's the same thing, different day, really? And I do wonder and question, as a function, whether we don't make it easy for people, colleagues, management to access what we do and how we do it, because we like to reinvent some of the terminology and the jargon that we put around kind of what we do and how we do it, so that potentially we feel like we're being more clever or more important. And what are we really adding by reinventing the wheel all the time? I was recently talking to one of my team, and they introduced the term talent fluidity, and I was like, what do you mean? And they were talking about internal mobility, and I was like, okay, well, why don't we talk about internal mobility rather than calling it something that we have to then create a whole new thing around?
Yeah, I get that, and I reflected as well after you said that I'm definitely a fad HR girl, and I probably use new terminology pretty quickly. But I studied for my CIPD over the last few years, and when I was talking about specific frameworks, I found that a number of authors would sort of dress the same framework up in slightly different language, but really you're talking about the same things. And I know we talk a lot in HR at the moment around change fatigue, and I think we'll probably get onto that topic later, but I wonder whether that's also that all of the different language that we're using is also creating a level of change fatigue in our own industry as well.
I think you might well be right. I just I think we have to keep things simple. We all thrive on simplicity. That's how humans work, in my mind.
Hmm.
And just adding new and different. And actually, maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe I'm just kind of long tenured in my career now, getting older. But maybe it's about people finding their tribes within workplaces and workforces, and the multi-generational teams that we see, and the fact that people want to have a certain language set because it enables them to feel like they are coalescing with other people in
Yes.
their teams or in their organizations, and there's probably something in that which I find really interesting. But I think as a function from an HR perspective, my view is our role is all about enabling the organization. It's about enabling business strategy. It's about enabling business success. It's about enabling colleagues' success and enabling people to reach their potential in their careers within an organization, and trying to make things as simple and easy as possible to make that happen is just kind of fundamentally certainly what I'm here to do in my role.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And even if you think around our role in forming internal narratives and communicating more widely with the business, it's quite common to question when you're in an exec environment whether something is going to land with the team, and you say things around, would this land with a 7-year-old? If it doesn't, let's make it more simple. And I think that's probably quite a good mantra to to live by in all facets of HR, perhaps. Um, when we connected prior to this, we talked a bit about change, and I know that you have been involved in multiple change programs, and so I wondered if you had any takes on when you've seen change done really well, and what the attributes of a good change program looks like in practice.
I have been involved in many change programs, and some of them have been really successful, and some of them not so much. Um, I think for change to land, for change to stick and be embedded, there's got to be an incredibly clear sense of purpose about why you're making the change happen. Um, that's well communicated, that's well understood. Um, I think where change happens really well, trying to make it as quick and as fair a process as possible, where you can engage as many people as possible through the process, and understand who may not be somebody who's in favour of the change, and helping them to get on board with the change and lead the change. I think also leadership owning what you are trying to achieve is really important as well. Them standing at the front of it and guiding the organisation through it is a huge benefit when it comes to making change happen positively.
Yeah, I fully agree. It has to come down from the top as well, and filter down through them, hopefully, to all layers. Why do you think people resist change so much?
I think going through the change curve is fascinating. It's part of the human condition, isn't it? And watching people go through the change curve, sometimes they'll go through it quickly, sometimes they won't, sometimes they'll swing around in it for a little while. I think it's about the sense of certainty people have. And what I've come to understand really is that I think people talk about kind of control a lot, but actually, I'm not sure it's about control. I think what people are always searching for is certainty. So, what does it mean for me? How do I get to the best outcome possible for me and my situation? And that sense of I don't have control over this is the thing that is difficult for people through the process. But when you can create certainty for people quickly, then it enables them to move through that change curve more quickly. Whatever the outcome is, if they know what the outcome is, then they can work through it. And I don't think I've been through many change programs where people have got to the end of it and realised that it wasn't the best outcome for them, even if it's been a very difficult and challenging process for them going through it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think a lot of HR leaders that I speak with feel that we are on a consistent change program at the moment. And although we seem to be operating at a pace of change that we've never operated at before, there are still a number of employees and team members that feel like they are owed some level of stability. And I wonder whether it's a kind of a generational piece or whether it's a rod that we create for our own back a little bit with things like very structured job descriptions, and very specific roles and responsibilities. And I know we talked about this in relation to what is the future for job descriptions? Are they actually a positive or potentially a con in the world of HR and the world of consistent change? Do you have a view on that?
Yes, absolutely. I have a view on most things. So I think you're absolutely right. The pace of change has never been quicker, and the pace of change in the outside world has never been quicker. Um, and the move towards skills-based organizations where job descriptions are kind of more open, more skills-based, which allows more fluidity in terms of moving people around organizations, allowing people to access opportunities or work on projects or programs, is probably the way things will progress when it comes to how AI impacts organizations and how kind of the future of organizations evolve. I think it will take quite a long time to get there. We've had competency-based organizations, we've had skills-based organizations, but you know, they've not really been that different from each other. And I think the next evolution of an organization is probably going to be quite different, especially smaller, kind of not so institutional organizations. I think they'll be able to win much more quickly in that space because they'll have more flexibility.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's making me reflect back on your initial piece on your career and how you came in at a graduate level. And I think that the shift towards organizations focusing less on specific knowledge or specific experience and more on skills, because a large percentage of roles are going to be AI enabled. That means that we don't necessarily need a large knowledge base or loads of experience in a particular role. Instead, we need someone to be able to like manage change, be resilient, be curious. Leaves a bit of a gap between what graduates have in terms of skill sets versus what organizations are looking for. Um, what do you think the future ladder looks like for graduates in a world where we are looking for maybe skills over specific knowledge?
So we've taken a view which is kind of stepping back in time a little bit, I think. So
Mm.
we've gone back towards the apprenticeship model. So rather than grad schemes, we have implemented 5 different academies that have a number of apprenticeships built within them, so that we're inviting school leavers to come into our organisation and build their skills aligned to what the organisation needs are and how they can flex their career as they learn. We've had a couple of real wins. So, for example, we have an HR graduate that's joined us who shows some real strengths around AI. So we seconded her into the AI team so that she can work on HR-based AI projects to enable the HR function and to bring those skill sets back into the HR team and teach the rest of us how we should be using AI in HR. So I think that the future of graduate schemes, and I think the future of employment will be around, like you said, the growth mindset, wanting to learn, helping to teach others, and being open to change and being open to wanting to do things differently, and not necessarily about a deep core skill set in a certain kind of job family competency framework type, but the ability to flex and change, the ability to want to try new things, the ability to kind of want to experience different things and take that learning with you and apply that across a multitude of different parts of an organization will be how careers will develop in future.
Yes, I think I love that you're on the front foot with that. I've been speaking with a number of HR leaders who are talking more about intensive apprenticeship style programs. Where do we stand now with work-based trials? Like, how do we assess capability rather than focus on the highest level grad that comes from X university? And I think that is the space that we're all going to be operating in soon. When you were talking about those skills, then I was thinking, how do you develop them? Which then led me to thinking about good managers. And it reminded me that you said to me the other day, why can't we get people management right? And I wondered if we could unpack that now. What did you mean by that? What do you think is going wrong in the world of people management?
Well, I think there's a few things. So I think colleague experience in any organisation is based on their manager. Having a great manager, we all remember the people that we've worked for that have been fantastic, and we will also remember those that are not so much. And I think creating the future, especially for the younger people coming into the workforce, creating an environment where you've got people managers that are able to identify strengths, kind of encourage people into different areas, be able to kind of move people around in the right way is going to be super important. But the amount of time that I spend coaching uh, managers and managers to really think about the capability of the people they've got working for them and how they're leading their teams and the experience that they're giving, it's still amazing. And we've run people management programs kind of in a number of organizations I've worked in because the base skills are just not there. And I think in many organizations, people become people managers because they're really good at their job. They're very technically strong.
Yes.
And the next stage is to move into a people manager role, but they might not like people very much. They might not be very good at people management. They might, not have had the right development to support them in becoming a great people manager. But that leads to retention issues, it leads to engagement issues, it leads to ER issues. So getting people management right for me is an absolute hygiene factor of a successful organisation and a high performance organisation. I don't think you can have a truly high performing organisation or business unless you've got great people managers leading teams of people who feel engaged, understand the purpose of what they're doing, understand the vision of their team and what their team does in terms of the broader organisational strategy and their role within it, and understand the parameters and the boundaries in which they can operate and understand that they've got somebody on their team kind of helping them develop and helping them grow in their careers.
Yeah. I mean, management and the way that you work with your manager has such a big impact on your career, how you feel about coming to work. And, I think you do see the same complications and challenges in every organization. And, I was thinking there, what if we did, and I'm sure this actually does happen in practice, but not at my organization, like almost those intensive management apprenticeships where you give someone an opportunity after a few weeks to say, actually, I thought this was really good, but it's probably not for me because so naturally, for some reason, there's this affiliation between being a manager and moving up the ladder. And it can be hard to create space for those individual contributors to really feel like there is I suppose, an opportunity for them to continue up the pathway and up the track, particularly in small or medium-sized organizations. Um, what would be your advice to a HR leader who is listening today and thinking, "Oh, I just can't get people management right in my organization. Where could they start if they wanted to go back tomorrow and make a big impact, or start to try and make a big impact anyway?"
I think what's important is really thinking about what are the characteristics that make a great people manager, and what are those characteristics that are really important in the environment that you are operating within. So, in a tech company, it'll be different from a financial services company versus, a manufacturing company, for example. But what are the core elements about being a great people manager? How to engage, how to communicate, how to coach, how to be a fussy recruiter, whatever it is in terms of the environment that you're working in, um, and identify kind of what the gap is for any individual, really. I don't think, sheep dipping people through programs can work, but probably costs way too much money. But, really understanding where people have got spikes and troughs, and helping those managers and leaders to support each other's development in terms of kind of, you're great at that, you're great at that. Why don't you two get together and talk about why you're so good at those bits, but what are the bits that are missing or lacking in your experience, and helping to develop them, because actually teaching somebody else is the best way to kind of embed a core skill in yourself, and measure and monitor it, because if you don't, then it won't get done. So identify where you want to make improvements, understand what the metrics you need to put in place in terms of engagement, retention, whatever those KPIs might be, and make sure you're measuring against them, and understand which of the levers that you're pulling is making the biggest difference.
Makes a lot of sense. Every HR leader I speak with has different measures of success that they like to look at, in terms of how they believe managers are performing, how well engaged they feel their team is. Are there any specific measurements or any specific pieces of data that you like to hone in on when you're trying to measure success in these types of projects, or when you're trying to improve specific things such as management?
Um, so I think engagement is really important. Kind of it's a really good signpost to how a manager is performing in their role, in terms of sometimes kind of too high level of engagement can indicate poor management as much as a
Yes, I love that.
low level of engagement. So I think that's something to watch out for. Um, I think also things like attrition, but within HR, you get a real sense of the sentiment of teams and people managers, and how people are doing. So lots of this can be done on metrics and KPIs, but some of it is just around kind of sentiment, and really understanding what's going on in your business, and who you've got, and what their strengths are, and how you can support their development.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I suppose, let's be honest, as HR leaders, we have a pretty good ear to the ground and understand what's happening in most facets of the organization. Um, we're actually almost to time, would you believe? But I have one last question for you. We have talked about how we have the same job role, but our jobs are very, very different, and how vast HR is in terms of different responsibilities that you take on. Uh, but I'm going to go broad with this question. What do you think the future holds for HR? What do you think HR looks like in 5 years' time?
Great question. I think that HR are going to be at the spearhead of the AI um, evolution of organisations. And I don't mean that necessarily from a technology perspective, although there is some thinking about whether the chief people officer and the chief information officer at some point combine, because of the number of agents that will be used within organisations, and the fact that actually does it become more of a technology organisation with some people rather than a people organisation with technology. So I think that will be interesting to see how that plays out. But enabling change and transformation in organisations, supporting the organisations going through the emotional cycle of change, looking at org design, org development. Do we move to skills-based organisations? I think another part of what will be really important from an HR perspective is how do we bring young people into the workplace? How do we really enable the future of careers? How do we enable those build of meta skills? All of those things are going to be really interesting challenges for us as HR professionals. And, all of the usual day job, I don't think is going to fall away in the next 5 years, but that strategic view of what does the future of work look like? What does the future of work feel like? Where do we do it? How do we do it? I think is going to be some really interesting challenges for us to face into.
Yeah, I agree. How does work get done?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Ellie. You've been super insightful, and yeah, I'm sure our listeners will take a lot away from today's podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Louise.